The forgotten guardians of the galaxy. Kovac sat on the weathered stone bench in the warm glow of the midday sun. At 100 cycles old, days like these brought comfort to his aged bones, letting him forget, if only for a moment, the weight of centuries on his shoulders. The plaza around him hummed with life. Hatchlings chirped as they played, merchants peddled their wares, and elders like himself exchanged quiet conversation. Yet, Kovac's gaze remained fixed on the massive statue before him, a monument to a race that had once shaken the galaxy to its core, humanity. The statue depicted a human, tall and imposing, clad in battle-worn armor. In one hand it held a weapon, a symbol of their might, while the other extended in peace, a gesture of their unexpected compassion. Though the Kexian people revered this monument, to most of the younger generations, it was little more than a relic of myth. But to Kovac, it was a memory as vivid as the sky above. He closed his eyes and exhaled deeply as the chatter of approaching voices drifted toward him. His class of 30 young hatchlings scampered into view, their energy infectious. Despite their noise, he couldn't help but smile. Teaching history to these eager minds was his life's work, and today's lesson would be about the statue, his favorite topic. "Come in, hatchlings," Kovac called, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The younglings quieted, their clawed feet clicking on the stone floor as they found their seats in the semicircle around him. For a moment, the air was filled with rustling feathers and whispers. He stood before them, gesturing grandly to the towering statue. "Who can tell me what this monument represents?" he asked, his voice steady and measured. A young hatchling in the back raised a claw tentatively. "It's a human, honored elder." Karak chirped, his tone brimming with pride at knowing the answer. "Very good, Karak," Kovac said with a nod. "And what do we know about humans?" He scanned the group, noting the exchange of curious glances. Rudak, another bold student, stood. "They're just a myth, honored elder. My sire says they were never real, just stories to frighten hatchlings into behaving." A chorus of murmured agreement rippled through the class. Almost every claw in the room shot up when Kovac asked how many of them believed humans were mere legends. He shook his head slowly, disappointment flickering across his features. "That is incorrect," he said firmly, his gaze sweeping over the group. "Humans were real. I know because I was there when they saved us." The room erupted into an excited buzz of voices. "You saw them. Were they as big as the statue? Where are they now?" "Enough." Kovac raised a claw, silencing the commotion. He waited until their wide-eyed attention was fully on him. "I was not much older than you when they came. Back then, our people lived on our ancestral homeworld, Koran, but it was not the utopia you might imagine." His voice softened as he recalled those dark days. "We were a fractured race, our fledgling colonies scattered across our moons. Our technology was primitive by today's standards, and we had only just begun to explore the stars. When disaster struck, we were unprepared. Our second moon, Perk, was unstable, pressure building beneath its surface. At first, we thought it would merely inconvenience the science outpost stationed there." Kovac paused, his eyes glinting with emotion. "We were wrong. The moon began to crack, threatening to shatter completely. If it did, massive chunks of Perk would rain down on Koran, obliterating our cities and turning our lush world into a wasteland." Panic spread, and with it came desperation. We called out to the stars, pleading for aid from the other species we had met. Do you know how they responded? The hatchlings shook their heads, hanging on his every word. Some ignored us. Others demanded exorbitant payments for their assistance. A few even offered us refuge, at the price of our freedom. They wanted us as servants, slaves. Kovac's voice hardened, his claws tightening into fists. We were left with no choice but to prepare for extinction. That is, until the humans arrived. He turned back to the statue, his expression softening with reverence. They came in numbers we could not fathom. Ships of all sizes filled our skies. warships, transports, even luxury vessels. They brought their tools, their technology, and their people, all to save a race they barely knew. They dismantled our cities, temples, and monuments, carrying them to safety. They gathered samples of every plant and animal on Koran, ensuring that nothing of our world would be forgotten. The class was utterly silent now, captivated. Kovac let the weight of his words settle before continuing. In less than 10 rotations, they evacuated our entire population. They gave us a new home, a world they had been terraforming for themselves. And when we asked what they wanted in return, they laughed and said, "Pizza and beer." Kovac chuckled at the memory, though a shadow of sorrow darkened his face. They only wanted our friendship. He turned back to the class, his gaze piercing. So you see, hatchlings, humans are no myth. They were real, and we owe them everything. But humanity is gone now, betrayed by those who should have been their allies. The room filled with gasps and whispers as Kovac's words sank in. One brave student raised a claw. "What happened to them, honored elder?" Kovac's voice dropped to a solemn whisper. "That, young one, is a story for another day." As the hatchlings filed out, their minds buzzing with questions, Kovac lingered by the statue. He placed a claw on its base, the cool stone grounding him. "You saved us," he murmured, "and we will never forget." He glanced at the sky, as if searching for something, perhaps a glimpse of humanity among the stars. The arrival that changed everything. The next day, Kovac stood at the base of the towering statue once more, waiting for his students to arrive. The plaza was alive with the morning bustle of Kexian life, but his thoughts were elsewhere, lost in the memories of humanity's fateful arrival. As the hatchlings gathered, their excited chatter confirmed their eagerness to hear more of his story. Today, he would take them deeper into the events that reshaped their world. "Settle down, hatchlings," Kovac said, gesturing for them to take their seats. The young ones quickly quieted, their eyes wide with anticipation. "Yesterday, I told you of our people's despair and the betrayal we faced from other races. Today, I will tell you of the humans' arrival and how they saved us from certain doom." Kovac began pacing slowly, his claws clicking softly against the stone floor. "We were on the brink of annihilation. Our leaders had nearly given up hope. The fault lines on Perk widened with each passing day, and the moonquakes became so severe that even our science outpost was abandoned. Messages were sent to every race we had met, pleading for assistance. Most ignored us, and those who responded did so with greed or cruelty." He stopped and turned to face the students, his voice growing heavier with emotion. "But one day, something miraculous happened. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was standing beside my sire, watching the horizon. The sky darkened, not from a storm, but from ships. Hundreds, no, thousands of them. They appeared as if from nowhere, a fleet so massive it blotted out the sun. At first we thought it was an invasion, but as they drew closer, we saw the insignias, the mark of the humans." The students gasped, leaning forward in their seats. "What did their ships look like, honored elder?" one of them asked eagerly. Kovac smiled faintly. "They were unlike anything we had seen before. Their warships were sleek and angular, bristling with weapons. Their cargo ships were enormous, capable of carrying entire buildings. And their transports, they were so numerous that it seemed the humans had brought their entire civilization to our aid." He paused, letting the image sink in. The humans wasted no time. They deployed teams to our cities and outposts, coordinating evacuation efforts with precision that was both awe-inspiring and humbling. They dismantled our temples, factories, and schools, loading them piece by piece onto their ships. Even our most sacred artifacts were treated with care, as if they understood their importance. "But that wasn't all," Kovac continued. "The humans didn't just save our people. They saved our world. They brought specialized teams to gather samples of Koran's flora and fauna, ensuring that our ecosystem would survive on the new planet they had prepared for us. They even brought tools to extract and preserve our water, transferring it to massive storage tanks for use on our new home. One of the hatchlings raised a claw. Why did they help us, honored elder? They didn't know us. Kovac nodded thoughtfully. That is the question my sire asked their leader, Admiral Tanaka. Do you know what he said? He paused for effect, his gaze sweeping over the young faces before him. Because it is the right thing to do. The class fell silent, the weight of those words sinking in. Kovac's voice softened as he continued. The humans saw us as equals, not as lesser beings. They asked for nothing in return. No payment, no allegiance, no servitude. They gave us everything we needed to survive and rebuild, simply because they could. The students were riveted, their imaginations painting vivid pictures of humanity's grand fleet and selfless actions. Kovac let the silence linger before speaking again. It was not easy, he admitted. The evacuation took 10 long rotations, and the humans worked tirelessly, never stopping to rest. They dismantled their own terraforming equipment to ensure our new home would be ready for us. When we finally arrived on the new planet, we were greeted by even more humans. They had constructed temporary shelters for us, dug reservoirs to hold the water they had brought, and prepared the land for our settlement. His voice grew wistful. I remember stepping off the ship and seeing rows upon rows of human workers, toiling under the alien sun to ensure our comfort. They didn't complain. They didn't demand recognition. They simply worked, side by side with our people, until every last one of us was safe. A hatchling near the front raised her claw. What happened to them after, honored elder? Did they stay with us? Kovac's expression darkened, a shadow passing over his features. For a time, yes, they stayed to help us rebuild, teaching us how to use their technology and guiding us as we established our new civilization. But he hesitated, the words catching in his throat. It was not to last. He turned back to the statue, his gaze lingering on its solemn figure. The humans had their own battles to fight. A new threat emerged, a race so cruel and powerful that they threatened not only the humans, but all intelligent life in the galaxy. The humans answered the call to war, rallying what allies they could to stand against this menace. They fought bravely. But what, honored elder? A young voice broke the silence. Kovac's shoulders slumped, the weight of his memories pressing down on him. They were betrayed, he said softly, and the galaxy paid the price. The students sat in stunned silence, their minds struggling to comprehend the gravity of Kovac's words. After a long pause, he straightened and turned back to them. That is a story for another day, he said gently. For now, remember this. The humans gave us a second chance at life. They were not myths or legends. They were real. And they were the greatest allies we could have ever asked for. As the students filed out, Kovac remained by the statue, his thoughts heavy. He placed a claw on its base, as if drawing strength from its cold, unyielding stone. We owe you everything, he whispered, and we will not forget. The sunlight glinted off the statue's polished surface, casting long shadows across the plaza, a reminder of a race that had left an indelible mark on the galaxy and on Kovac's heart. The shadows of betrayal. Kovac began his next lesson under the same towering statue, the familiar gathering point for his wide-eyed students. Their eagerness to hear more about the mysterious humans was palpable, their young minds still spinning with the tales of humanity's generosity and bravery. Today, Kovac would delve into the darker chapters, the part of the story that still haunted him even after all these cycles. Take your seats, hatchlings, Kovac said, his voice steady but tinged with an underlying solemnity. The young ones quickly obeyed, the light of anticipation in their eyes undimmed despite the serious tone of their elder. Yesterday, Kovac began, I told you about the human selflessness, how they saved our people and asked for nothing in return. But the galaxy is not always kind to those who act with honor. Sometimes the most virtuous are the ones who suffer the most. The students leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. One of them raised a claw. "What happened, honored elder? Who betrayed them?" Kovac's eyes darkened, his gaze drifting to the horizon as if searching for answers in the distant sky. "Patience, little one," he said softly. "First, you must understand the enemy they faced." He turned back to the class, his voice growing heavier. "The Wraith. That is what the humans call them. They were unlike any race the galaxy had seen before. Tall, four-armed creatures covered in natural black armor, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural intelligence. They were engineered for one purpose: destruction. The Wraith did not negotiate. They did not seek allies. They gave only one command to those they encountered: submit or die. Gasps rippled through the class, and Kovac allowed the gravity of his words to sink in before continuing. But submission was a lie. Even those who surrendered to the Wraith were not spared. Entire planets were burned, their inhabitants enslaved or exterminated. The Wraith were relentless, and their thirst for conquest knew no bounds. He paused, his voice softening. When the humans learned of the Wraith's atrocities, they did not hesitate. They called for war, not for their own survival, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. Only a handful of races answered their call, my people among them. The hatchlings straightened with pride at the mention of their ancestors' bravery. Kovac nodded approvingly before continuing. But most of the galaxy's great powers refused. They thought they could remain neutral, that the Wraith would spare them if they stayed out of the conflict. Some even mocked the humans, calling their crusade foolish. They did not understand what humanity was capable of. Kovac's voice grew firmer as he recounted the early days of the war. The humans fought valiantly. With the few allies they had, they'd waged a campaign unlike any other, striking at the heart of the Wraith forces with precision and determination. The battles were fierce, the losses heavy, but they did not falter. He stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto the statue as if it held the answers to all the galaxy's questions. And then came the betrayal. The students held their breath, the tension in the air almost tangible. It was a member of the Grand Council, Kovac said, his voice low and steady. One of the powerful races that refused to join the fight. They claimed neutrality, but in secret, they feared the humans more than the Wraith. Perhaps it was jealousy of humanity's strength. Perhaps it was cowardice. Whatever the reason, they gave the Wraith the location of humanity's most important colonies, Earth included. A collective gasp filled the air. Kovac's claws tightened into fists as he continued. The Wraith acted swiftly, launching an assault so devastating that it is still remembered as the Cataclysm. In a single rotation, Earth and its colonies were obliterated. The cradle of humanity, the birthplace of their species, was reduced to ash. One of the hatchlings raised a trembling claw. Didn't the humans fight back? They did, Kovac replied, his voice thick with sorrow. But the attack was sudden and overwhelming. By the time the humans realized what was happening, it was too late. Billions perished in an instant. Families, cities, entire ecosystems gone. Only a handful of survivors escaped, scattered across the stars. Less than 1 million humans remained. The students sat in stunned silence, the weight of the story pressing down on them. Kovac's voice softened as he continued. Imagine, young ones, losing everything: your home, your loved ones, your history. For the humans, it was more than just the destruction of their planet. It was an attempt to erase their existence, to snuff out the light of their civilization forever. He turned to face the class, his gaze unwavering. But the Wraith made a critical mistake. They left survivors, and those survivors vowed that humanity would not fade quietly into the night. The hatchlings leaned forward, their interest rekindled. What did they do? One of them asked. Kovac's expression hardened, his voice taking on a note of resolve. They gathered what remained of their people, their ships, and their technology. They salvaged the wreckage of their destroyed fleets and studied the Wraith's weapons, learning their enemy's strengths and weaknesses. And then they began to build. He gestured toward the statue, his voice rising. 5 motherships, each a city unto itself, armed with weapons that could level planets and carrying the last vestiges of humanity's spirit. They called them the Revenge, the Vengeance, the Retribution, the Reckoning, and the Avenger. These ships became their home, their fortress, and their weapon of retribution. The students were mesmerized, their imaginations running wild with visions of these massive ships. Kovac's voice softened once more as he concluded the lesson. With these ships, humanity left the galaxy of their birth, vowing to find the Wraith's homeworld and deliver justice. But they did not forget the betrayal, and they would not rest until the guilty were brought to account. As the students filed out, their expressions a mixture of awe and sorrow, Kovac remained by the statue, lost in thought. The memory of humanity's resilience and determination still burned brightly in his mind, a testament to the strength of a race that refused to be extinguished. The great hunt begins. Kovac stood at the base of the towering statue as the hatchlings arrived, their young faces filled with anticipation. The air was charged with curiosity, for the previous lesson had left them with a burning question. What became of humanity after the cataclysm? Today, Kovac would tell them of humanity's transformation from saviors to relentless hunters, driven by the twin fires of vengeance and survival. Settle in, hatchlings, Kovac began, his tone heavy with gravity. Yesterday, I told you of the betrayal that nearly destroyed humanity. Today, I will tell you how the humans responded, not with despair, but with purpose. They swore an oath, not just to survive, but to ensure that no other race would endure what they had suffered. The young ones leaned forward, their eyes wide with curiosity. What did they do, honored elder? One of them asked. Kovac's gaze drifted to the statue, his voice low and measured. In the aftermath of the cataclysm, humanity gathered what little remained of their people and resources, less than 1 million souls scattered across the galaxy, clinging to survival. Their numbers were small, but their resolve was unbreakable. He turned to face the students, his voice growing stronger. They began by salvaging everything they could from the wreckage of their once great fleet. Thousands of destroyed ships, both human and Wraith, were picked apart for resources. From this debris, they constructed 5 colossal motherships, each one a marvel of engineering and a symbol of their unyielding spirit. These ships were named the Revenge, the Vengeance, the Retribution, the Reckoning, and the Avenger. The students gasped, their imaginations painting vivid pictures of these immense vessels. Each ship was a city unto itself, Kovac continued, 10 kilometers long, 6 kilometers wide, and bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. These motherships became the cradle of the human race, carrying their people, their technology, and their hope. But they were not just cities, he added, his voice darkening. They were weapons. The humans knew that survival alone was not enough. They had to fight back. They had to ensure that the Wraith and those who had betrayed them would face the consequences of their actions. Kovac began pacing, his claws clicking against the stone floor. Over the next 10 cycles, humanity worked tirelessly. They mined asteroids, harvested resources from barren worlds, and reverse-engineered the Wraith's technology. Their scientists and engineers, driven by desperation and determination, made breakthroughs that propelled their technology far beyond what it had been. He stopped and faced the students, his eyes gleaming with intensity. Imagine, young ones, a people so few in number that every life was precious. Every soldier, every scientist, every worker had to give their utmost. They knew that failure meant extinction. And so they pushed themselves to the limits of their abilities, creating weapons, armor, and ships that would make them the most formidable force in the galaxy. One of the hatchlings raised a claw. Did they find the Wraith, honored elder? Kovac nodded solemnly. Yes, but not immediately. For 30 long cycles, humanity searched the stars. They scoured every corner of the galaxy, following the faint traces left behind by the Wraith. They found destroyed worlds, charred ruins, and the remnants of countless civilizations. Each discovery fueled their resolve, for it reminded them of the cost of inaction. He gestured toward the sky, his voice rising. The humans became relentless. They moved from system to system, hunting the Wraith with a single-minded determination. Wherever they went, they liberated enslaved races, offering them freedom and a chance to join the fight. Their numbers grew as they forged alliances with those who had suffered under the Wraith's rule. The students were riveted, their imaginations ablaze with images of humanity's journey. Kovek's voice softened as he continued. But it was not an easy path. The humans faced hardship at every turn. They battled the Wraith's fleets, often outnumbered and outgunned. They endured the loss of friends and family, their numbers dwindling with each engagement. Yet they pressed on, driven by the memory of their lost home. He paused, his gaze turning inward. And then, after 3 decades of relentless pursuit, they found it. The Wraith's homeworld. The cradle of the monsters who had brought so much pain to the galaxy. The students gasped, their excitement palpable. "What happened next, honored elder?" one of them asked eagerly. Kovek's expression darkened, his voice taking on a somber tone. The humans prepared for the final battle. They called upon their allies, assembling a coalition of races who had suffered under the Wraith. Together, they formed a fleet the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. Thousands of ships and millions of soldiers, united in their resolve to end the Wraith's reign of terror. He turned back to the statue, his voice filled with reverence. This was humanity's greatest hour. They stood on the precipice of vengeance, ready to honor the memory of their fallen. But the battle would not be easy. The Wraith were waiting, their defenses formidable. And the humans knew that victory would come at a great cost. Kovek faced the students, his gaze unwavering. "That, young ones, is where we will continue tomorrow. For now, remember this, the humans were not just warriors. They were protectors, liberators, and survivors. They turned their grief into strength, their pain into purpose, and they taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget." As the students left, their voices buzzing with excitement, Kovek lingered by the statue. He placed a claw on its base, his thoughts heavy with the weight of history. "You hunted the monsters," he murmured. "And in doing so, you became legends." The sun set behind the statue, casting long shadows across the plaza, a reminder of the unyielding spirit of a race that refused to be broken. The final battle begins. The plaza was unusually quiet the next morning as Kovek arrived to continue his story. The students had already gathered, their faces filled with anticipation and a hint of unease. Kovek noticed the tension and nodded approvingly. His tale was achieving its purpose. Today, he would recount the pivotal moment in humanity's long struggle, the battle that would define their legacy. "Good morning, hatchlings," he began, his voice steady and measured. "Today, I will tell you about the final campaign, the moment when humanity's quest for justice brought them to the Wraith's doorstep." The students leaned forward, their full attention fixed on the elder. Kovek paced slowly, his eyes distant as if he were reliving the events himself. After 30 cycles of relentless pursuit, humanity and their allies found what they had been searching for, the Wraith's home system. It was a fortress, surrounded by an armada of ships and defenses that could have held off the combined forces of the entire galaxy. But the humans were undeterred. They had faced impossible odds before, and this time they were prepared. Kovek gestured toward the sky, his voice growing stronger. The coalition fleet was the largest ever assembled, a testament to humanity's determination and the alliances they had forged. Thousands of ships, representing dozens of species, gathered under the humans' leadership. At the center of it all were the 5 motherships: the Revenge, the Vengeance, the Retribution, the Reckoning, and the Avenger. These massive vessels were not just weapons, They were symbols of humanity's resilience and resolve. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the young minds before him. The Wraith knew we were coming. They had fortified their system, deploying countless warships and planetary defenses. Their ground forces numbered in the billions, entrenched in cities and strongholds across their worlds. It was a fight they were prepared to make to the last soldier. The students exchanged nervous glances. One of them raised a claw. How could the humans hope to win against such numbers? Honored Elder. Kovac smiled faintly, a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. Because they were more than warriors. They were strategists. The humans understood that brute force alone would not be enough. They needed precision, coordination, and above all, determination. And they had all three. He began pacing again, his voice rising with intensity. The coalition fleet split into 5 groups, each led by one of the motherships. Their strategy was simple but bold: divide and conquer. The Wraith's fleet was vast, but humanity's technology and tactics had evolved far beyond what the Wraith could comprehend. The humans deployed decoy fleets to draw enemy forces away, then struck with surgical precision at key points in the Wraith's defenses. The students hung on his every word, their imaginations filling with images of colossal battleships and blinding flashes of energy weapons. Kovac's tone grew darker as he continued. The space battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire fleets clashed in the void, their weapons lighting up the darkness like 1,000 suns. The human ships, though fewer in number, were faster, tougher, and far more deadly. They tore through the Wraith's armada, targeting their command vessels and disrupting their formations. He stopped and faced the students, his gaze piercing. But it was not without cost. For every Wraith ship destroyed, a human ship was damaged or lost. The Revenge alone accounted for the destruction of a dozen Wraith dreadnoughts, but it bore the scars of the battle, its hull riddled with holes, its crew fighting desperately to keep it operational. One of the hatchlings raised a trembling claw. "What about the ground battle, Honored Elder?" Kovac nodded solemnly. "Ah, the ground battle. That was where humanity's greatest sacrifices were made. Once the Wraith's orbital defenses were weakened, the coalition forces began their assault on the planets below. Millions of soldiers, supported by mechs, tanks, and air support, descended onto the Wraith's worlds. The humans led the charge, their power-armored soldiers striking fear into the hearts of their enemies. He paused, his voice softening. The Wraith fought viciously. They were cornered, and they knew there was no escape. They used every tactic, every weapon, and every ounce of their strength to hold the coalition forces at bay. Cities became battlefields, and entire continents were scared by the fury of the fighting. Kovac's eyes glistened with emotion as he spoke. But the humans were relentless. They fought not just for victory, but for justice. They liberated countless slaves, beings from dozens of races who had suffered under the Wraith's rule. These freed souls joined the fight, adding their strength to the coalition's cause. The students were silent, their young faces reflecting a mix of awe and sorrow. Kovac's voice grew stronger, his tone resolute. And then, after weeks of brutal combat, the coalition forces closed in on the Wraith's final stronghold, their capital city. It was a fortress unlike any other, bristling with defenses and guarded by the Wraith's most elite soldiers. But the humans did not falter. He stopped and turned to the statue, his voice filled with reverence. The final assault was led by General Garcia, a human whose name will forever be etched in the annals of history. Under his command, the coalition forces stormed the city, breaking through its defenses and driving the Wraith back to their last bastion. Kovac faced the students, his gaze unwavering. "That, young ones, is where we will continue tomorrow. For now, remember this: the humans fought not just for themselves, but for all who had suffered. They turned their grief into strength, their pain into purpose, and their quest for justice into a beacon of hope for the galaxy." As the students left, their voices buzzing with excitement, Kovac remained by the statue, his thoughts heavy with the weight of history. He placed a claw on the statue's base, as if drawing strength from its cold, unyielding stone. "You faced the darkness," he whispered, "and you brought the light." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plaza, a reminder of a race that had refused to bow to despair, rising instead to forge a legacy that would echo through the stars. The fall of the Wraith Empire. Kovac stood silently before the statue as the hatchlings arrived, their usual chatter replaced by a hushed reverence. The previous lesson had left them spellbound, and they knew today's continuation would bring them to the climax of humanity's epic struggle. Kovac's gaze lingered on the towering figure of the human warrior, a symbol of resilience and justice that never failed to inspire him. "Gather around, hatchlings," Kovac began, his voice calm but imbued with solemnity. "Yesterday we spoke of humanity's final campaign, of their relentless advance toward the heart of the Wraith's empire. Today I will tell you of the end, the moment when humanity's vow of vengeance was fulfilled." The students leaned forward eagerly, their faces a mix of anticipation and dread. Kovac's expression darkened as he began his tale. The coalition forces had fought their way through the Wraith's vast defenses, leaving a trail of destruction across their worlds. But it all led to this, the Wraith homeworld, the heart of their empire, where their creators had once stood before being consumed by their own monstrous creations. It was a planet fortified beyond imagination, a fortress surrounded by a fleet of over 1,000,000 ships. The hatchlings gasped, the sheer scale of the opposition almost incomprehensible. One of them raised a claw. "How could the coalition hope to win against such numbers, honored elder?" Kovac nodded at the question, his gaze steady. "Because they had more than numbers. They had resolve. They had ingenuity. And above all, they had humanity. The coalition leaders knew that a direct assault on the planet would be devastating. So they devised a plan, one that combined the strengths of every race in the coalition." He gestured toward the sky, his voice rising. First, the coalition fleet engaged the Wraith Armada, drawing their ships into battle. The humans' motherships led the charge, their immense firepower carving paths through the enemy ranks. Meanwhile, smaller ships equipped with advanced cloaking technology slipped past the chaos, targeting key points in the Wraith's defenses. The students were riveted, their imaginations filled with images of colossal ships locked in combat. Kovac's tone grew darker, but the Wraith were no fools. They fought back with everything they had. Their weapons tore through coalition ships, sending hundreds to fiery deaths. The space around the planet became a graveyard, littered with the wreckage of ships and the bodies of those who had fallen. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Yet, even as the battle raged above, the ground forces prepared for their assault. General Garcia, the human commander, led the coalition army, a force of millions, including power-armored human soldiers, towering mechs, and battalions from every allied race. Their goal was simple: breach the Wraith's capital city and end the war. Kovac's voice softened as he recounted the ground assault. The landing was perilous. The Wraith had fortified every inch of their planet, turning it into a death trap. Coalition forces landed under heavy fire, their dropships weaving through storms of anti-aircraft fire. Many were lost before they even touched the ground, but those who made it fought with unmatched ferocity. He gestured toward the students, his tone growing more intense. "Imagine it, young ones, the chaos of battle, the roar of weapons, the screams of the wounded. The coalition forces advanced through it all, their determination unshaken. The humans led the way, their power-armored soldiers charging into the fray with a fury born of centuries of pain and loss." One of the hatchlings raised a trembling claw. "Did they reach the city, honored elder?" Kovac nodded, his expression grim. "Yes, but it was no easy feat. The Wraith fought like cornered beasts, their numbers seemingly endless. Every street, every building, every inch of ground was contested. The coalition army pushed forward, their losses mounting, but they refused to falter. By the end of the first cycle, They had surrounded the capital city, the Wraith's final stronghold. He paused, his gaze distant. The city was a fortress, its walls bristling with weapons and its streets crawling with soldiers. The coalition leaders knew they could not take it through sheer force, so they turned to the humans once more. Using advanced infiltration techniques and cloaked transports, human soldiers infiltrated the city under cover of darkness. The students leaned in closer, their eyes wide with wonder. Kovac's voice lowered, drawing them in further. Inside the city, the humans struck at the Wraith's command centers, their supply lines, and their key defenses. They caused chaos, turning the Wraith's own city against them. By the time the main coalition forces launched their assault, the city's defenses were in disarray. He stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto the students. And then, at the heart of the city, they found it, the Wraith's command nexus, the place where their leaders had orchestrated countless acts of destruction. The humans led the final charge, their soldiers fighting through waves of enemies to reach the nexus. It was here that the Wraith made their last stand. One of the students raised a claw hesitantly. What happened to the Wraith leaders, honored elder? Kovac's expression darkened further. They refused to surrender. They fought to the bitter end, but they were no match for the coalition's might. The humans breached the command nexus, dismantling its defenses and confronting the Wraith's leaders. In the end, justice was delivered, not with vengeance, but with resolve. The Wraith Empire fell, their power broken. He paused, his voice softening. But the cost was great. Millions had perished in the final campaign. Humans, allies, and even the Wraith's enslaved victims. The coalition forces stood victorious, but their triumph was tempered by grief. The students sat in stunned silence, the weight of the story pressing down on them. Kovac's voice grew firm as he concluded. And so, the Wraith were defeated, their empire brought to its knees. But humanity's journey did not end there. They had won the war, but their true challenge lay ahead, rebuilding what had been lost and forging a future from the ashes of the past. He faced the statue, his gaze filled with reverence. They taught us that even in the face of unimaginable loss, hope can endure, that even when the darkness seems insurmountable, the light of justice can prevail. As the students departed, their voices hushed. Kovac remained by the statue, lost in thought. The memory of humanity's final battle was a testament to their resilience, a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plaza, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can be found. The legacy of humanity. Kovac stood beneath the shadow of the towering statue, the fading sunlight casting a golden hue over its resolute figure. The students had gathered in a tight circle, their faces reflecting the weight of the story they had been hearing. Today, the tale would come to its end, or perhaps to its beginning. Kovac placed his claws behind his back, gazing into the expectant eyes of the young ones. Young ones, he began, his voice steady and solemn. Yesterday, I told you of the fall of the Wraith. Today, I will tell you what became of the humans afterward, the legacy they left for the galaxy and for us. The students leaned in closer, their breaths held as Kovac continued. The Wraith Empire was shattered. Their homeworld, once a symbol of their dominance, now lay in ruins. The coalition forces stood victorious, but they did not celebrate. The price of victory had been steep, millions of lives lost, countless worlds scared by war, and the memory of what had been endured by all. Kovac's voice softened, filled with a quiet reverence. Humanity, though battered and diminished, did not seek vengeance upon the innocent. They turned their focus to rebuilding. The coalition's first act after the war was to free the remaining slaves of the Wraith and return them to their homeworlds. The humans played a central role in this effort, offering their technology, ships, and soldiers to ensure that every life touched by the Wraith's cruelty could find safety and peace. One of the hatchlings raised a claw. But what happened to the humans, honored elder? Did they leave us again? Kovac nodded slowly, his expression wistful. Yes, they did. Humanity had grown weary of the galaxy that had once turned its back on them. They had fulfilled their vow, bringing justice to the Wraith and liberation to their victims. But they knew that their presence would always remind others of war and retribution. And so, they chose to leave. He gestured to the statue, his voice imbued with emotion. The 5 great motherships, the revenge, the vengeance, the retribution, the reckoning, and the avenger, became humanity's new home. With the support of their allies, the humans gathered their people, their technology, and their memories, and departed for a distant corner of the universe. Their destination was unknown to us, but they left with a promise that if the galaxy ever faced such a threat again, they would return. The students' eyes widened, their young minds captivated by the idea. Will they ever come back, honored elder? One of them asked. Kovac's gaze grew distant, his voice thoughtful. Perhaps one day. Humanity's legacy is not just in their actions, but in the lessons they taught us. They showed us the power of resilience, the strength of unity, and the importance of standing against injustice, no matter the cost. Their departure was not a goodbye. It was a reminder that their spirit lives on in the alliances they forged and the lives they touched. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the young ones. In their absence, we have prospered. The coalition they helped build endures, a testament to the bonds they created. The Kekshins, the Kran, the Baryons, and countless others have thrived because of humanity's sacrifices. And while they may no longer walk among us, their presence is felt in every act of courage and kindness we perform. Kovac turned to the statue, his voice growing stronger. This monument is not just a reminder of their deeds. It is a beacon of hope. It tells us that even in the darkest times, there is light. That even in the face of impossible odds, there is a way forward. The students were silent, their expressions a mix of awe and inspiration. One of them finally spoke, their voice filled with determination. We will honor them, honored elder. We will remember. Kovac smiled faintly, his heart swelling with pride. Yes, young ones. Remember them. Not just for their victories, but for their spirit. Humanity was more than warriors. They were dreamers, builders, and protectors. And their story is not over, for it lives on in us. He stepped back, his gaze sweeping over the students. And so the lesson ends, but the journey continues. Go forth and let their legacy guide you. As the students departed, their voices subdued with the weight of what they had learned, Kovac remained by the statue. He placed a claw on its base, his thoughts a mixture of sorrow and pride. You left us stronger, he murmured, his voice barely audible. And for that, we will always remember. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plaza. Above, the stars began to emerge, their light a reminder of the vastness of the universe, and of the race that had once illuminated it with their unyielding spirit. Humanity's story had ended in the galaxy, but its echoes would resound for generations to come, a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and unity.